Modern human beings live surrounded by an ocean of noise, yet they thirst for silence. Rudolf Steiner, the great initiate and father of anthroposophy, already warned us. The human soul does not speak with words. It speaks with silences, with rhythms, with invisible gestures that traverse the surface of matter. What we call daily life is often just a noisy veil that obscures the true symphony of existence. We have become accustomed to the clamor of cities, the bombardment of information, and the incessant chatter of our own minds, confusing this sonic chaos with reality. But beneath all this din, there is a constant murmur, an archaic melody that has never ceased to resonate in the depths of being. This is the forgotten language, the mother tongue of the spirit, a dialect that is not learned from books, but remembered in the sanctuary of the heart. Steiner teaches us that silence is not merely the absence of physical sound. Silence is a presence. It is the sacred space where the soul breathes. When consciousness ceases to react convulsively to external stimuli and begins to perceive, something extraordinary happens. We stop seeing objects and begin to read meanings, because the soul, in its luminous essence, does not describe the world. It feels it. It does not analyze facts coldly. It interprets them as living symbols of a greater reality. Every experience that crosses its path, a fleeting glance, an old wound, a word of comfort, or the fall of a leaf in autumn, possesses a hidden vibration, a spiritual signature. Whoever learns to silence the noise of the ego begins to hear the true language of creation. In ancient times, at the dawn of humanity, Steiner revealed that humankind possessed an instinctive understanding of this language. We didn't need so many words because communication was a communion of essences. Primordial humans spoke with gestures, with song, with color. The sunrise was not an astronomical phenomenon, but a divine message. The movement of the stars was sacred writing, legible in the firmament. Everything was a sign. Everything was a word. But intellectual progress, necessary for the development of individuality and freedom, exacted its price. It separated humanity from the cosmos. We learned to articulate complex phonemes, to construct abstract theories, but we unlearned how to hear the whisper of the stars and the lament of the earth. We gained vocabulary, but lost connection. The soul, which once lived immersed in living symbols, found itself exiled in a world of mute literalness, and yet it persists. The soul keeps trying to speak. It doesn't use the arid logic of the intellect. It uses the language of destiny and intuition. It shakes us through that sudden premonition that has no logical explanation, through the dream that leaves a metallic taste of warning upon waking, or through that pain that returns cyclically, knocking at the door of consciousness until it is understood. The rational mind, in its analytical arrogance, dismisses these phenomena as coincidences or chance occurrences. But Steiner is categorical. By denying these signs, man denies his invisible half. He becomes a fragment, an isolated note that has lost its score, and a fragmented life cannot hear the total melody of the universe. The soul, when ignored, descends into matter to make itself heard. It uses the body as its densest scroll, an inexplicable tremor, a chronic illness, a tension that never dissolves. These are sealed letters that the spirit sends to the personality. When the body aches without an evident mechanical cause, it is the soul that is shouting in its ancient language, the language of the symbol. Steiner invites us to a radical change of perspective. Illness is not an error of the biological system, nor a divine punishment. Illness is communication. The physical body is the chessboard where the spirit plays its most decisive games, writing lessons that the mind refuses to learn. We, children of the materialistic age, try to silence these messengers with pills and distractions, treating the symptom as an enemy to be defeated. We don't understand that, often, the symptom is the last way the soul has found to say, "Stop, look, change." Modern education trains the intellect with brutal efficiency, but buries sensitivity. From childhood, we are taught to speak correctly, to argue, to convince, but no one teaches us to listen inwardly. We grow up full of words, but empty of understanding. We master human languages, complex grammars, binary codes, but we are illiterate in the language of our own soul. This secret language has no syntax, only resonance. It cannot be translated. It must be experienced. To relearn it requires an act of courage, unlearning urgency. It is necessary to suspend the critical judgment that dissects life and return to living observation, to direct contact with what pulsates behind forms. Steiner affirmed that every thought we emit has a musical tone, every emotion possesses a temperature, every action radiates a spiritual color. The soul, in living, composes an invisible symphony in the ether. If we had spiritual ears, we would know exactly who we are, for we would hear the dissonance or harmony that we emanate. But the noise of the world is a potent drug. Every time we turn on a screen to escape boredom, every time we fill the void with futile entertainment, every time we respond to someone automatically, the voice of the soul fades a little more. It retreats. Its voice becomes a faint, distant, almost imperceptible thread, until the terrible moment arrives when silence ceases to be a refuge and becomes a threat. We are afraid to be alone in silence because we intuit that there we will be confronted by everything we didn't want to hear. And yet, this fear is the door. Only those who cross the desert of their own silence can find the source. The soul's time is not clock time. It doesn't speak of chronological linearity, but of eternal time, of the time of Kairos. Their messages arrive when they should, obeying a law of spiritual necessity, not our capricious desires. And they always arrive dressed in symbols, a number that obsessively repeats itself in your life, an unlikely encounter on a forgotten street corner, an overwhelming feeling of already seen. These are the golden threads of a tapestry that reason cannot weave, but which the soul recognizes immediately. Rudolf Steiner said that whoever learns to read the signs of destiny becomes their own master. The entire universe conspires to teach, and the soul is the translator that converts the raw events of life into distilled wisdom. In true mystery schools, the disciples' first exercise was not oratory nor prayer, but listening. Pythagoras demanded years of silence from his students. Why? Because one must listen until one hears the pulse of life within one's own chest. This is the primordial sound. In it resonates the echo of all past existences, the memory of the cosmos, the voice of the Logos. When man, exhausted from seeking answers outside himself, dares to remain still, he discovers the disturbing truth. The soul has never ceased to speak. It was he who ceased to listen. The soul always speaks, but only silence translates it. Steiner summarizes, in a world that rushes to avoid feeling, stopping to listen is the ultimate revolutionary act. Each human soul is an instrument tuned by the cosmos, a taut string vibrating between the visible and the invisible. However, most of us have forgotten how to play our own instrument. We live projected outwards, externalizing our energy in production and consumption, while the inner world, the true stage of reality, remains in the shadows, without an interpreter. The body, the face, the depth of the gaze, the texture of dreams, all these are desperate attempts at translation. Joy expands the aura, Fear contracts and chills it. Sadness darkens it. Love illuminates and warms it. The soul paints its landscape through our physiology. It uses our nerves as brushes and our breath as rhythm. The human being who ignores these variations lives like a sleepwalker, or like a deaf musician who plays a score without hearing the music he produces. It is in this fatal disconnection that the disease of the times takes hold. Depression, anxiety, existential emptiness. According to the anthroposophical view, these are not merely chemical imbalances. They are cries from a silenced soul, a lump in the throat that won't untie, a pressure in the chest without a cardiac origin, a cry that springs forth for no apparent reason. These are the pre-verbal language of the spirit. Steiner warned us that crisis, whether physical, emotional, or biographical, is always a plea for attention. It is the soul breaking through the window of normality to say, "I am here. Listen to me." And when wakefulness becomes too noisy, the soul seeks refuge in the night. Steiner considered sleep not as a pause in consciousness, but as a higher school. While sleeping, the astral body frees itself from physical bonds and returns to the spiritual world, its true home. There, it reviews the day's lessons, not with the logic of the brain, but with the morality of the heart. Dreams are the projected shadows of these nocturnal experiences. Even the most confused dream contains a sacred geometry, a coded message aimed at restoring the lost balance between thinking, feeling, and willing. We should not dissect dreams with the cold scalpel of materialistic psychoanalysis, but rather listen to them with reverence, as one listens to an oracle. In waking life, the soul also uses repetition, the karmic echo. Why do I always attract the same type of person? Why do I always stumble over the same stone? Why do certain situations return with clockwork precision, changing only the actors but keeping the script? Nothing is bad luck. In Steiner's view, repetition is the pedagogy of the universe. What is repeated is a word that the spirit insists on pronouncing because it has not yet been understood. The soul creates these resonances, magnetically attracting the circumstances necessary for its learning. While the ego complains about bad luck, the soul patiently works on shaping its destiny. Modern science asks how things happen. Spiritual science asks why and for what purpose. Existence is not a random sequence of data. It is a text. Each experience is a sentence. The task of the awakened human being is to become literate in the grammar of the spirit. The soul does not fear pain. It fears meaninglessness. It fears not being heard. When a deep emotion is repressed by cold intellect or social conventions, the soul shuts itself up in a thick muteness. Then emptiness arises. Steiner said that emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is the voice of the soul that has been denied. It is a painful waiting for presence. What the soul asks for is not a quick solution, but companionship. It wants to be heard as one listens to the sea, without judgment, allowing its ebb and flow to bring to the surface what lies in the depths. Educating the inner ear is the most urgent task of our time. It is about relearning slowness. It is about recovering the capacity for contemplation that the ancients possessed naturally. Each conscious pause in the middle of the day is a wordless prayer. Each felt breath is a reconnection. For Steiner, true education is not about accumulating information, but about refining perception. He who does not know his own silence cannot utter a true word, for the soulless word is noise, but the word imbued with soul is creation, is white magic. Each human being is a word that the universe pronounces only once. Understanding this is the key. The soul already has a voice. What the world lacks is an ear. When we awaken this subtle hearing, the inner world ceases to be a frightening enigma and becomes music. And Steiner assures us, this music does not come from outside. It is the resonance of the Creator himself within the creature. If the body is the temple, thought is the acoustics. Steiner now takes us to even more dizzying terrain. The idea that the mind is not a silent factory of concepts, but an orchestra. He said that most people don't think. They are thought. They are traversed by currents of automatic ideas, repetitions of dogmas, and echoes of public opinion, mistakenly believing that they produce what they only reproduce. True thought, living thought, is something radically different. It is an act of cosmic creation. To think, in its highest sense, is to participate in the continuous genesis of the universe. Every genuine thought emits a sound in the spiritual world. Not a sound that the physical ear can perceive, but a vibration that resonates in the substance of the ether. Steiner asserted that thought is not abstract. It is geometric and musical. When an idea is born from an awakened soul, it resonates in the invisible worlds like a chord of light. The modern mind, cold and calculating, has killed thought, transforming it into a sterile mechanism of analysis. We think without warmth, without blood, without heart, and this dead thought separates us from life. Cold thought cuts, Steiner said. Living thought unites. For him, thinking should be an organ of the heart, not just the brain. When the mind descends to the heart and warms itself in the furnace of feeling, the idea transforms into song. To truly think is to hear how the cosmos pronounces itself through us. In his esoteric exercises, Steiner asked initiates to meditate on a simple image, a seed, a geometric shape, until the intellectual concept dissolved and only the presence of the idea remained. At that point, thought begins to shine from within. It ceases to be a representation of reality and becomes reality itself, vibrating in consciousness. Modern science is beginning to scratch the surface of this mystery with studies on cardiac coherence and electromagnetic fields. But Steiner saw much further. He knew that thought is an architectural force. Hateful thought creates destructive dissonance in the fabric of the world. Compassionate thought creates harmony and structure. Therefore, thinking is an ethical act. The quality of our thoughts determines the music of our lives and the spiritual environment of the planet. Human beings are not isolated islands in their skulls. They are transmission stations. Educating thought is caring for the world, he taught. When we manage to silence mental noise and think purely, thought ceases to be a neurotic monologue and becomes a dialogue with the gods. If thought is sound, art is its materialization. For Steiner, art was never a luxury or entertainment for leisure time. Art is the primordial language of the spirit-seeking incarnation. Before learning to speak, the soul sings. Before understanding rationally, it creates forms. Music, painting, architecture, and poetry are not human inventions. They are translations. The true artist does not create from nothing. He recalls. He brings to the sensible world the laws of harmony that govern the higher worlds. Steiner viewed the creative act as a sacrament. When we paint, when we model clay, when we arrange sounds into melody, we are reenacting the act of divine creation on a human scale. Beauty, in this context, is not just aesthetics. It is truth made visible. An authentic work of art functions as a portal. It allows the contemplator to feel, for a moment, the atmosphere of their true spiritual homeland. This is why great art moves us to tears without us knowing why. It strikes an ancient chord, a longing for a place where everything is harmony. In Waldorf schools, Art is at the heart of pedagogy, not to train painters, but to form whole human beings. Steiner said that beauty doesn't teach concepts, it teaches rhythm. When a child draws or sings, they are ordering their inner chaos. They are learning that the world has meaning, color, and proportion. The adult who has lost the capacity to create, who lives only in the aridity of utility and efficiency, sickens the soul. Modern cynicism is, at its core, an orphanhood of beauty, but Steiner expands the concept of the artist to all of us. The creative word doesn't belong only to geniuses of music or literature. Living is an art. Cooking mindfully is art. Speaking with kindness is art. Listening to others with empathy is a supreme form of social art. Steiner introduced the concept that our words shape the ether. Human speech, when imbued with awareness and rhythm, has formative power over reality. The soulless word destroys. The living word heals. He called this the new liturgy of humanity, transforming the everyday into the sacred through the beauty of gesture and intention. Where there is conscious beauty, the abyss between the human and the divine momentarily closes. And what happens when two souls who have learned to listen meet? Steiner describes a form of communication that transcends spoken language. He said that words, however poetic, only touch the surface. True communication occurs through vibration. In the spiritual world, there are no misunderstandings because there is no concealment. Souls are transparent to one another. You don't say what you feel, and what you feel, and that essence radiates from you like light and color. On earth, we live in the exile of opacity. We use words to hide what we feel, to manipulate, or to defend ourselves. But we have all experienced flashes of this higher communication. That moment when we look into someone's eyes and know with absolute certainty that we already know them. Steiner called this karmic recognition. It is the memory of an ancient pact. In that instant, the language of the soul breaks the barrier of time. No explanations are necessary, for the vibration of the other resonates within our own structure. Souls understand each other in the silence they share, not in the phrases they exchange. He said. He prophesied that human evolution is moving towards moral transparency. In the future, lying will become impossible, as the internal dissonance it causes will be visible or audible to others. Telepathy will not be a magic trick, but the natural consequence of absolute empathy. When the lower self, with its fears and selfishness, gets out of the way, a clear channel is created between two beings. Love ceases to be a volatile emotion and becomes a state of knowledge. To love someone is to be able to hear their fundamental note and help them play it more clearly. Steiner invites us to practice this deep listening in our relationships. Try to hear not only what the other person says, but and try to hear the silence behind the complaints, the fear behind the aggression, the hope behind the cynicism. When we listen at this level, we are speaking the language of angels. We are validating the other's existence on a spiritual plane, and often, this kind of listening heals more than any advice. We have finally arrived at the center of the labyrinth. To whom does the soul desperately try to listen? Steiner answers, to the spirit, to its own eternal origin. The voice of the spirit is not external. It is the resonance of our true identity, the one that was never born and will never die, but which observes the drama of temporal life with infinite patience. This voice speaks through synchronicities, those impossible coincidences that seem designed by an invisible hand. It speaks through the intuition that saves us at the last second. It speaks through the great trials that break us only to open us up. Steiner taught that destiny is not something that happens to us, but something we summon. The outer world is a mirror of the inner world. When the soul is ready to take an evolutionary leap, the spirit arranges the stage of life, sometimes painfully, to facilitate that leap. The human tragedy is that we are always too busy to heed that call. The spirit doesn't shout, it waits. It waits in the space between two thoughts, in the pause between two breaths. It speaks in the language of quiet certainty. Unlike desire, which is feverish and anxious, the voice of the spirit is calm and relentless. It says, "This way," and when we hear it, fear dissolves, not because the danger disappears, but because we understand that we are being guided. But there are times when the spirit is silent. Steiner spoke of the dark night or the silence of God. These are periods when no answer arrives, when we feel abandoned in the void. For anthroposophy, this silence is also language. It is the spirit saying, "Now you must walk on your own 2 feet. Now you must find the light within yourself, not outside." It is proof of freedom. If the spirit were to guide us by the hand all the time, we would never become free creators. We would only be divine puppets. The silence of the spirit is the space it gives us to become human. Rudolf Steiner left us a map, but the journey is solitary. The secret language of the soul is not a code to decipher the future. It is a method for awakening in the present. Learning this language requires us to become both musicians and instruments. It demands that we look at illness, conflict, and loneliness not as mistakes, but as questions that life poses to us. To live anthroposophically is to live in a state of listening. It is to walk through a forest and feel that the trees are the green thoughts of the earth. It is to look at the stars and know that they are the geometry of our own soul projected into infinity. It is to understand that we are not alone. We never have been. Isolation is an illusion created by the deafness of the ego. When humanity finally learns to silence the reactive mind and open the ear of the heart, the world becomes enchanted once more. Not by magic, but by perception. Life ceases to be a struggle for survival and becomes a liturgy, a sacred conversation between the drop and the ocean. And in the end, what the soul hears in this great silence is the simplest and most terrible thing of all, the remembrance of who it truly is. It hears its own note in God's symphony, and upon hearing it, it returns home. The secret, Steiner said, is not to accumulate wisdom, but to remove what prevents wisdom from flowing. It's about cleaning the mirror. It's about tuning the string. The universe is singing right now. The question that remains is not whether it has something to say, but whether you are finally willing to listen. If this dive into Rudolf Steiner's vision touched something deep within you, if it resonated with a forgotten chord in your soul, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Together, we will continue deciphering the mysteries of the spirit.